There are some serial killers. By day, they disappear into the crowd. By night, they blend into the city's darkness. What makes them hard to catch isn't only the crimes they commit. The real danger is that we can trust them without ever knowing who they are. You get into a taxi, it's late, you're tired, and the driver looks ordinary. And in that moment, you don't know you've just begun the last ride of your life. In the late 1990s, a man roaming the nights of Tehran was doing exactly that. His name was Gholomreza Khoshruy Kordiyeh, but the city would come to know him by another name, the Tehran Vampire. The Tehran Vampire's criminal past didn't begin overnight. In his early 20s, he was arrested on charges of kidnapping and rape. But he managed to escape before he ever stood trial. For 4 years he vanished. And when he returned, he was no longer just an attacker. In early 1997, the nights of Tehran began to change. After midnight, a taxi started roaming the streets. The driver looked calm. He spoke normally. Nothing seemed unusual. But some of the women who got into that taxi never made it home again. The Tehran Vampire picked up his victims at night, promising them a safe ride, then drove them to the city's most deserted places. And then the attack would begin. The women were stabbed again and again. There was no limit to the violence. To cover his tracks, the Tehran Vampire burned bodies with gasoline, but the fire couldn't erase everything. Some bodies hadn't burned completely. In forensic examinations, dozens of stab wounds were counted on a single victim. This was no longer a random crime. This was a planned hunt in the night. Police were struggling to find the attacker, and the Tehran Vampire kept driving his taxi at night. The city began to live in fear. Women hesitated to get into a taxi alone at night, and families began warning their daughters. And the press gave him a name, the Tehran Vampire, because he appeared only at night. For months, Kordiyeh moved without leaving a trace. But like every serial killer, at some point he made a mistake. 2 victims managed to escape him. They told police what they had lived through. They described the driver's face. A suspect sketch was made. And soon after, a man detained at a shopping mall for suspicious behavior looked strikingly like that sketch. Blood traces found in his vehicle, witness identifications, and his conflicting statements. The Tehran Vampire was cornered. In the end, he confessed. He admitted to killing at least 9 women. This wasn't an ordinary trial. The trial was broadcast live on state television. Thousands were watching. For the first time, the city clearly saw the face of the man who had terrified it for months. The verdict was clear: death. But the execution would be even more shocking than the trial. In the summer of 1997, thousands gathered. A construction crane had been set up. The Tehran Vampire was first flogged by the victims' relatives. Then, half-conscious, he was hanged from the crane. The crowd chanted. Some believed justice had been served. His final words were surprisingly ordinary. He asked God for forgiveness. The Tehran Vampire story wasn't remembered only for the murders. What set him apart was that he targeted the city's most ordinary sense of trust. A taxi, a night ride, a simple trust in a stranger. After the execution, officials were uneasy, because sometimes the end of one serial killer can be a beginning for others. And indeed, not long after, when another taxi driver tried to attack a woman, he said, "I will be the next Tehran Vampire." A serial killer dies, but the shadow he leaves behind can live on for a long time.